Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day, and you can catch us here on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. So we're going to rank every game by importance for KU football here from 12 down to number 1. And this is just importance. We're going to start with number 12. That would be the Wagner game. That's the second game for KU. It's technically week 1 of the college football season. And you could argue that, it's funny, you could argue any FCS game should be higher on a list because the loss is almost worth more than the win. But, I don't know if you're approaching this and how important any of the games are. And if you're approaching this from a standpoint of the worst case scenario is you lost to an FCS team. I don't want to approach things from the worst case scenario. That's not a fun way of thinking. And that's, that's like, oh, you're thinking in baseball terms and you're like, well, you need to sacrifice the runner over to left field. And you're like, well, what if he strikes out? Okay, well, then you're just screwed. Why are we thinking the worst case scenario? It doesn't matter. Okay, number 11 on the most important. I don't need to really get into why the Wagner one is number 12. Number 11 on the most important is the at Arizona game. So I do think Arizona is going to be a little bit better than they were last season, right? They were 4-8 last season. They lost a lot of games by a lot of points. I think that when you look at Arizona, they should be a little bit better in some areas. You're going on the road. If they are a bowl team, going on the road to a bowl team, that's not an easy game. So this isn't me saying what are the easiest games. It's me saying what are the most important. Here's the deal, though. From a Kansas perspective, now, obviously, it's a different equation if you're talking about can you get to 10-2? Can you win the Big 12? Then every game has maximum importance because your margin of error is so thin that you can't really say, okay, this game is more important, whatever. But the Arizona game a little bit lower because they are predicted one of the worst teams in the Big 12. It's right before you have a bye week. And it's not like a rival or anything like that. And you're chances are you're going to drop some road games this year. That's just what happens in the Big 12 when these teams are close together and you're playing on the road. So that's number 11. Number 10 on the list is at UCF. I think this one is important knowing that you're at Texas Tech the following game, and Texas Tech could be one of the better teams in the Big 12. Certainly they're one of the most talented, and you want to avoid a losing streak. So winning this game would prevent that from happening. But again, there's no rivalry ties or anything like that. And it's almost more expected if you're to lose on the road than you are at home. And to that perspective, it's okay, the games that are at home become more important because you have to take care of those home games if you want to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Number 9 on the list is versus Cincinnati. So going back to the take care of home field, from you have new teams in the Big 12, UCF and Cincinnati. There's not much rivalry or hate there or anything like that. I don't know. Maybe there's some hate from the Cincinnati side just from Kansas relation to the Kansas City Chiefs. But outside of that, it's okay, well, this is the home one. And I think Cincinnati is going to be a little bit better than UCF. So that's why that one is a little bit higher on the list. Number 8 on the importance list is at Texas Tech. If you're talking about what are the hardest games for KU, at Texas Tech is certainly one of the 5 hardest. Probably maybe it'd be a little higher than that. I don't know. It'd certainly be one of the 5 hardest. We'll wait and see what the end of the year. But from an importance perspective, if Kansas loses at Lubbock to what ends up being a good team in a place that Kansas has traditionally struggled to play, it's not going to be a huge thing that gets held against them or is going to if you're viewing this from a perspective of can Kansas go over on their win total? Can they win 8 games or can they at least make a bowl game? You never know, right? We look at last year and they went 5-7 and you can point to 5 different games where if this or that happens, they make a bowl game. But realistically, for you to make a bowl game, you shouldn't have to win at Texas Tech, I guess is my point. Hopefully you do. It'd be great if you do. But if you do lose that game, that's going to be one of those where it's a little bit more expected to lose that game. You should still be able to overcome that and make a bowl game. So that's why it's a little further, despite it being one that would certainly be an awesome win for KU. And then number 7 on the list of the most important games for KU is versus Oklahoma State. So this is another one where you got to take care of your home field. It's also a little bit later in the season, in the back half of the season. And I think what specifically makes this one interesting is it's right after the K-State game. Can you follow up the Kansas State game? And that could go either way. Either you're coming off a loss against Kansas State in which you got to get yourself off the mat and be able to respond from that, or it is coming off a win over Kansas State, ideally, hopefully, right? To where then you have to get off the mat in a different way. You have to get off the hangover mat from that one of you had this awesome win, you haven't beat them in so long. It would be very easy to kind of have a letdown the following game against Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State's a very interesting team because to me, they're a huge enigma. How good are they going to be? Are they going to be 4-8? Are they going to be 9-3, which we've seen so many years with Mike Gundy, right? Anything is in the world of possibility there. So that one becomes, I think, very interesting too, especially too if Oklahoma State is really good, then maybe that one raises in terms of the level of importance. All right, let's get to the top half, the top 6 games for the most important games for KU on the schedule. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Continuing on here on Locked On Jayhawks, the most important games for KU football on their 2025 schedule. And again, don't forget, you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. Okay, number 6 on the list, I do have the Fresno State game. Now, you would think, okay, why is Fresno State, why is that behind some Big 12 games? The conference games are the ones that count if you're talking about Big 12 title. And yes, if you tell me that at the end of the year they're going to be in the Big 12 title race, then yes, I would sink this Fresno State one. As of right now, I'm more so just approaching it from, can you be like an 8-win team around where the over-under is? And from that perspective, you really need to beat Fresno State, right? If we look back to last year, you go 5-7, and like I said, you can point to 5 or 6 different games and say that's the difference why they didn't make a bowl. But certainly the UNLV game, you could just point to that and say, hey, if you would have beat your Mountain West opponent in the non-conference, you would have made a bowl game. Also, probably wouldn't have hurt from a early season momentum and confidence of the team perspective if they would have won that game against UNLV. So don't repeat that this year against Fresno State. What adds, I think, to importance of this one, beyond setting the tone for the season, is the new stadium, it being the opener. You have an opportunity to, create a new legacy seems a little bit strong, but like start something new at Kansas. Make this a place of winning. And it's not just setting the tone for the season, it's setting the tone for the new stadium. And so the game becomes very important from that perspective, as well as if you lose the game, you might start getting yourself to like, okay, is this team going to be able to scrap to make it a bowl game? Versus if you win the game, it's like, okay, all our dreams are still on. Like we think we can still win all these games. Okay, number 5 on most importance is at Iowa State. Now, again, you could argue this one should be higher. And if you're talking most difficult games for KU, like Texas Tech, this one would be higher in that regard. Because Iowa State could be pretty good. It's on the road. It's senior day for Iowa State. But again, going back to the idea of like, it would make sense if you lost a game on the road to a good team, especially when they're celebrating senior day like this one is at Iowa State. You've beat them 3 straight times. This one would make a little bit more sense. So from a perspective of which games are most important to win, you'd love to win it. It would be a phenomenal win on the season. It certainly would. But that's why it's only in at number 5. Number 4 on the list is versus West Virginia. And it's funny, again, because if you told me, like, okay, you can pick, I probably would take the at Iowa State win over beating West Virginia at home. But it's how these things are connected. And going back to setting the tone and creating that confidence and energy, West Virginia is your Big 12 opener. You would love to start on the right foot against West Virginia. In fact, we saw last year, right? Kansas played at West Virginia to open Big 12 play for them a season ago, and they lost the game. They lost the game in kind of losing it late, blowing it, whatever you want to call it. And that kind of set the tone for the first half of the season and for the start of Big 12 play. You have an opportunity to kind of reverse that here. It's also important because it comes off a bye. You only get 3 games this year where you're coming off a bye. Take advantage of those games. It's also another home game. Take advantage of your home games. You can hit the ding on that yet again. And the game before, again, you have a bye right before West Virginia. The game right before the bye, you're at Missouri, which is going to be a very difficult game for KU to play. Ideally, Kansas beats Missouri. But if Kansas does lose to Missouri, this would also represent an opportunity against West Virginia to avoid having that early season losing streak, which you so desperately want to avoid early in the year to, again, set the tone and keep the confidence high for later in the year. All right, number 3 on the most important games for KU is versus Utah. Utah is, I think, going to be a much better team this year. They have 2 guys who are being seen as first-round draft picks on the offensive line. They have a rushing dual-threat quarterback. They still had one of the best defenses in the conference in the country last year. So I think they're going to at least get like an 8-win team this year, if not contend for a Big 12 title. So they could be pretty good, and that'll make it a difficult game for KU. Beyond that, it is senior day for KU. So maybe from that perspective, you would put it higher because you want to send the seniors off right. Guys like Jalen Daniels going off on a final limb. And if you do end up being a Big 12 title contender, maybe you do move this one up. It's hard to, the 2 that are left on the list, and those are rivalry games. So it'd be hard to kind of jump over those. But from that perspective, this could be a team in your way if you do end up in that situation. Number 2 on the list, though, is at Missouri. Missouri's KU's biggest rival, so if you wanted to argue at number 1, I would have no qualms with doing that. And certainly it being the first game that you've played them since they were in the Big 12 adds even more importance because there's been such a long layoff. At the same point in time, it does make it that there's a little less hatred, at least for the first one? I don't know. We'll wait and see. I doubt the players will feel that when they go to Columbia there. But I have Kansas State at number 1, and I talked about this on a previous episode. Thank you, the Everydayers, if you already caught it. But the reason I have the Kansas State one ahead of Missouri, we know why they're both 1 and 2. The reason I edge out the Kansas State one over the Missouri one, you've lost 16 straight to Kansas State. You play Kansas State in the conference every year. You need to end the Kansas State streak. You'll get Missouri coming to Lawrence next year. Again, hopefully, ideally you win in Columbia anyway. But with Kansas State, the streak needs to end now. It's been too long, and especially how the last 2 years have gone. You need to reverse your fortunes this year. Like, that needs to be a thing that happens for KU this year. So Kansas State 1, Missouri 2, Utah 3, West Virginia 4, Iowa State 5, Fresno State 6, Oklahoma State 7, Texas Tech 8, Cincinnati 9, UCF 10, Arizona 11, and Wagner 12. Most important games in that order for KU football this season. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. And we'll see you next time on another edition of LOJ. We're going to be talking a little KU basketball off-guard preview with Cole Rosario, Jaden Dawson, and the likes. We'll also be breaking down the quarterback room for KU football in that episode. So make sure to subscribe to the show on our YouTube page and anywhere you get your audio podcast. See you then.